Hello and welcome back to Podcast with a K. I'm your host, Karla with a K, and we are here on this fine Sunday evening because we are live on Twitch right now and or WECS 90.1 FM with returning guest, Mack Rowe.
Hello, hello.
Hello, hello. Mack, how are you? It has been a while since we last spoke to you. I believe last we spoke, we had bonded over school in a pandemic, and now you've graduated. Welcome to adulthood.
I don't know if I want to be welcomed into it. It's kind of been a wild ride.
Do tell.
So yeah, school in the Panini. So my whole entrance into adulthood wasn't the typical graduate high school, enter the world. It was all online, and so I learned how to operate online, but living on my own and stuff through a computer. Not just with school and work, but also my friendships and stuff. Karla and I met in the pandemic playing Among Us, and that's how our whole friend group got together and everything else. So now that life is back to normal on some scale, and I've graduated, and now I'm immediately supposed to adapt to being in an in-person environment at 21 when I've never had to do that in my since 18 to now. And at 18, I moved out on my own, 2,000 miles away from home. And so I was 100% my family was not here to help me or anything like that. And it's still like that, but I learned to operate that entire life not in person. There was so much less responsibility. And now that I'm all right, new phase of life, but now nothing's online anymore. All of my jobs are in person. I'm going to have to relocate. Finding friends online in this kind of space is a lot more difficult now, but finding friends in a huge physical space is also really difficult just because my generation didn't learn to communicate person to person. We learned how to do that through an online space. So making friends and stuff, even in class, pretty much just didn't happen. All of my friends at school I made online prior to coming here. So it's a really weird, all right, everything I've now known, gone. Doesn't exist anymore, goodbye. And now there's this whole new thing, and everyone's like, why don't you know what you're doing? Clearly you're supposed to do this. Clearly not, because I didn't do it, because I didn't know otherwise.
Well, that's kind of, I think, the biggest secret that you learn about adulthood is that no one knows what they're doing. Everyone kind of figures it out as they're going, which sounds like such a cop-out answer. Oh, you figure it out at your own pace. It's true. It's true. I had a similar college experience to Mack. I think I was a year ahead of you in returning to school, but I am 5 years older than Mack. So my life story, I've talked about it a little bit on my either intro or outro podcast of the season, when I usually just, end of the year do my song reviews and what those songs have meant to me in that year. Long story short, if you are unfamiliar, I graduated high school in 2015. School is very expensive, and due to circumstances beyond my control, I couldn't afford it. There wasn't enough grants, there wasn't enough scholarships, there wasn't enough anything. So I freelanced for 3 years as anything I could. Senior year of high school, I, on a whim, entered an art auction. I hadn't painted in years. It was a hobby as a kid. The high school that I went to was a dual enrollment program at the community college that was geared more towards STEM careers. So for me to join that club was kind of just me looking for a hobby because everything that I was doing was math and science based. All of my pieces sold. So off of that momentum for the next 3 years, I did portraits of people's pets, of people's houses, of whatever they wanted. I did logo design. I did t-shirt design. I did anything and everything that I could do either on Canvas or on Photoshop and make money off of. I was there. I even did a little bit of logo work for a friend whose father owned an advertising company. Anything anyone came to me and said, "Hi, I give money, you give art." I said, bet. I got involved with photography and videography a little bit with a different friend who was looking for somebody. Essentially anything that I could take, I took. And towards the end of those 3 years, I was so frustrated with the world that I was ready to just up and leave and do anything. I, at my peak point of desperation, was going to move to Ireland to study Gaelic. Didn't end up doing that, but I did take a year of Gaelic here, which was pretty cool. 2018, I went back to school. First year was normal. First half was normal. Second half, we got kicked out because of a pandemic. Third year was fully online. Fourth year was quote unquote back to normal, at the very least on the ground. Graduated. I've spent the past year freelancing, doing contract work in media. So I've done graphic design for a gaming company. I directed content for a celebrity florist, and now we're here. So I've had, I've had kind of on and off of this is what it's like to be an adult on your own, make your money, make your moves. Back to school. Here you go. Someone spoon feeding you everything you're supposed to do. And now we're where we are now, which is, find something to do, bide your time, because from here to death, it's just this. This is it. You either chase your dreams, you make money, or you wither away doing nothing. I'm kind of doing a combination of the three, I guess, but that's where we are. But I wanted to ask you, Mack, given that we've had different experiences, your entire college experience was pretty much shaped by the pandemic, right? Because you came in when everything went fully online. Like you said earlier, everyone that you'd met online, you ended up not even meeting, and you had to create kind of a new circle and learn how to manage your own time and work kind of on your own to get everything done.
Yeah, it's weird because your 20s, not just at my age, at Carly's age, like so on and so forth, for the rest of your life, you're always learning, you're changing, you're learning how to navigate a life and what's thrown at you. Um, so at 18, when what's being thrown at me was college, which is a big transition, moving to a completely different state that I had no family in, that was a big transition. Um, Learning to live on your own is kind of tough, but also you're at the age where you're going through a lot and you're trying to navigate things like relationships and friendships and yourself and like that self-growth period. Um and then that thrown in with a pandemic where everything is shut down, people are acting very differently, people are dying all the time, like there are shortages of things, that kind of stuff. And my dad getting diagnosed with stage 4 cancer at the exact same time that literally the rest of this was going on. This all happened in like a 4-month period for me. When I was 18 and I moved out here, I felt like I was behind on some things, but at the same time, I was balancing other stuff that other kids my age weren't necessarily doing at the time. So now that that's kind of slowed down, my dad's fine, by the way. He's cancer free now. Woo,
Shouts
go
out,
Kevin!
Kevin.
Shouts out, Kevin! But like preparing essentially for like your dad to die and everything at 18 and navigating the rest of this stuff, and then being at 21, him being fine, college is done, I made it through. I did all the things I could. My education's done. I decided to do a certification and everything. On top of that, I still live where I live, but now I've made a spider web here. Like I have my network. I know where I get my hair done now. I know where to get my groceries. Like all of that's been established. Um but now it's still very unknown, like, okay, now that that portion is done, I still need to work on myself. I still need to work on friendships and everything and navigate this, like, self-discovery part of life and who I am, because I didn't necessarily get that during the pandemic when I'm stuck inside all day. But also finding out careers, and careers are really difficult because I don't know if it's the right one or not. I know I kind of like it. I know I'm good at it. But because I never got to experience life in a different way until right now, after my degree and everything, I'm like, is this the thing for me? Am I supposed to be doing something else? Like, is this the right path? No one knows. Because once you're 18, you stop getting directions. You only get people's opinions thrown at you left and right. And you do what you can to make of it. But, like, that's that.
And I think that, like you said, you kind of had it in your own way more difficult because you were also dealing with a lot of real life during your senior year of high school, into college, into a big move that ended up having you be where you are. And like, despite, I guess, the privileges that life did afford you, you were still stuck figuring out a lot. And that's how, as the title of the show is tonight, dealing with burnout, you actually ended your final year in between figuring out where to move out to after college, what job to keep after college, and also the classes you were taking, because you ended up switching majors, I believe, as well.
Mm-hmm.
You ended up being diagnosed with burnout through all of this. It wasn't just like a trendy TikTok catchphrase. You had like a diagnosis saying, "Hey, man, you're crashing and burning."
Chill. Yeah, so that happened last fall. And to paint a picture of what I was doing last fall, and I want to say part of this is because I have ADHD, so I get really impatient with things. So in theory, I'm like, yeah, I can handle all of these things at once because I like all of these things separately. So I can handle it because it'll bring me joy, right? Wrong. So wrong. So in fall, I had full-time classes. I was doing 15 credit hours of classes. Um, and they're senior year classes, so it's stuff that's a little bit more difficult. It's higher level classes to weed you out of things. So that on top of doing an internship for 15 to 20 hours every week, that wasn't for class credit, that was for my own doing because I needed it for class credit this last year, and so I didn't want to leave and come back. So doing that, I also got into streaming, and streaming was a source of income for me, so I was doing that really, really consistently and trying to build up my audience there. Um, I also live alone with 2 dogs in like a proper place that needs to be mowed and taken care of and home improvements and all of that. So that was a lot of responsibility for me to take on at this point in life with everything else. But also just remembering to like eat and sleep and get your car maintenance and making sure my dogs are okay, taking the vet appointments, all that stuff, while also trying to guide this social life online and in person got really, really, really overwhelming for me. And I thought that I was just being a little Debbie Downer. I was like, it kind of stinks now, but I'll be okay. But maybe I should try some therapy because there's other things I want to work on relating to like relationships and stuff. And when I got my therapist, she was like, oh, hey, we're gonna talk about burnout a little bit. And I figured out that there are 5 stages of burnout. I got diagnosed with level 4 out of 5, so it was very bad. Um, and that was really scary to hear because stage 4 is very similar symptoms of depression, which I struggled with separately. So getting that close to the worst part of my depression and not knowing it kind of shifted something. And I was like, oh, holy guacamole, this isn't great. And luckily I have a really awesome relationship with my parents and I'm very privileged because of them. And so they were able to cover up in the things that I could no longer carry because I was carrying too much at 20 years old. And I had to step back from things like my internship. And luckily everyone in my life was super kind. And I know not everyone has that kind of support in their life, which really sucks. But it's something I needed at that point. And luckily, obviously, I got through it and everything. And I was just coming down from all of that and realizing, like, oh, life's gonna be okay. Oh, on top of all of that, by the way, I was doing a certification. Completely forgot about that piece of the puzzle. My certification's completely separate classes and homework and reading from my normal, like, bachelor's degree. So it was just so much. I don't even know how I was making it through at that time. So then winter break hits, things slow down a little bit. I still have my certification. I still have my bachelor's. It's gonna look a little bit different. Still streaming and stuff, but I took it a lot more in proportion, and my internship was now going to be my classes, so that was a lot easier to handle. But then, this is gonna out where I'm at, or where I went to school at least. We had a really tragic thing happen at our school, and my teaching assistant ended up murdering a bunch of students at a sister school. And then I just got through all of that just to be met with like, oh, hey, this guy capable of doing these things who hated women, by the way, was in direct contact with me. I had been in the same room and stuff as him, which was already really jarring. But then I got harassed by media and stuff who found my name and was like, oh, tell us all the details and blah, 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 blah. And I just wanted to hide. I was like, I have too much on my plate already. I didn't want this really tragic thing getting thrown on. And now people know who I am. They're aware of my existence. I'm not being left alone to just like sit and play Sims and like exist. I am getting more expectations from all these people at the same stinking time. And I lost my marbles for a little bit around New Year's.
And you did end up taking a step back. I don't believe anyone really heard much from you for about a month.
I kind of went off the grid and I didn't mean to. It's just, and I love my friends dearly and they know this, but communicating through this is a lot more consuming than communicating in person because you're not reading body language or the noises or whatever that people are doing. It is strictly through texting or voice call, which is a lot more energy to try to portray what you want. So I completely had to step back from so much of it and learn to exist with just myself and get myself in order and what Mac needs before I could start dishing myself out to all the homies and all the fun things again, because I had no room for that at that point in time.
Right. And so, is that something that was advised to you when you were diagnosed with burnout? Tell me more about that entire process. Because I feel
So,
like I said earlier, it's kind of a trendy TikTok phrase, as many things are. And we've talked on the podcast before about how
social media
negative.
and their mental illnesses.
Well, not even, yeah, exactly. Like, that's the tone that this conversation shouldn't take, because right now we're trying to be posy vibes, not neggy vibes. But on an episode before with Raphael, we talked about why pop psychology can be more harmful than good, because whereas something can flag you to, hey man, that's not normal, you might have an issue to check out. If it's not interfering with your life, you're fine. If it is, seek professional help. But there's also a degree in which people tell you, oh, you didn't feel like doing homework today, you're depressed. Like, and these are big words that mean diagnosis and meds,
Mm-hmm.
or treatment at the very least. So tell us more about what actually goes down in a case of burnout. Not to say you need a diagnosis to validate your feelings, but tell us for your experience what that meant.
So, for all my mental health related things, most of the time when I get diagnosed with stuff, I didn't know what it entailed. I hear these words, I hear what they mean in a social media context, but I don't actually know what it means in the psychology sense of things, because my degree was in psychology. So when people are like, oh yeah, if you don't brush your teeth, you're depressed, I'm like, that's not true. Like, what are the actual symptoms of the thing? So when I got diagnosed with depression and anxiety, no idea those even existed, because I was like 14 at the time, and though they were starting to get trendy and stuff at Tumblr, there wasn't actual like things about it. It was just quirky to have it. Um and so that's when I found out like that's what I
It's
had
almost
there.
romanticized at that point.
Yeah. And I was like, me being where I was at 14 is not romanticized, and especially with my brother and
Or should not
everything, like
be.
it should not be at all. And it was really frustrating going through that during that era, because I was like, wow, this is such an awful time to get diagnosed with this thing. And the same thing with burnout. Like, so many TikToks were like, oh, I'm experiencing burnout. I'm doing so much. Like, I can't function or whatever. And so my symptoms for me to get diagnosed with stage 4 burnout was I was having extremely bad panic attacks, to the point I straight up could not go to work or school because I could not stop bawling my eyes out and get out of bed. It wasn't like oh, I'm crying. Like, I physically could not go because my body would like get so nauseous or cry even harder at the thought of doing a responsibility that I had to do at that time. Um, it also made me like cut out a lot of friendships and stuff. I started isolating myself just because things got so overwhelming. And I even my eating habits, like I lost a bunch of weight because I was so stressed out to the point I couldn't even figure out what to eat, like feed my body, and I felt I did not have time to do basic needs like feeding it. So I had to lose a bunch of weight, which clearly I don't have that much to lose. So that was like very dangerous. Um and my anxiety was just so bad. I felt behind all the time. I started feeling depression, which is why I thought maybe it was just a side effect of my depression, because I was like, oh, I'm just not interested in the things that I'm doing. It's a wave, it'll pass, we'll make it through. But when I told my therapist all that, especially with the panic attacks and like the loss of interest and cutting off my friends and all of that, that's when I got diagnosed as burnout, because of how much I had on my plate. Because the thing with mental illness is, a lot of them overlap. A lot of symptoms are going to overlap with a lot of things, including your normal life. A normal person can be depressed. Like, if someone passes away or something, you're going to be sad, you're going to be depressed. It doesn't mean you have depression. So same thing with burnout. You can be overwhelmed at things, but it is not persistent like burnout is. It is a constant, every single day, 24 hours. Like, you sleep less, like, or sleep more, and all of that. And so it's very similar to depression, except for the fact, clearly my root cause is the fact I had 8 things on myself, and I was doing like 90-hour weeks by the end of it with all of this stuff going on. And that's what made the differentiation between these two things. And essentially, if I didn't do that and I kept going, I probably would have had to be institutionalized or move back home and gotten physical support that way. So when TikToks are like, "Oh yeah, this is so quirky," I'm like, I literally could not keep myself alive at this point, even if I wanted to. And yet, girlies on TikTok are like, "Oh my god, slay!" I'm so overwhelmed.
Yeah, it sucks to see that like there are people who genuinely suffer from, I guess, what causes it to be, a diagnosable instance in which it's irrational, right? Like there might be a root cause, sure, but the reaction is not one that matches the trigger, or it starts to impact your life. Like you said, it breaks your routines. You sleep more or less than you need to. You eat more or less than you need to. And it is frustrating to see people kind of use it as a cop out. Like, it's okay if you're lazy. Like that's fine. But for you to be like, "Ugh, I just didn't do anything today. I think I have burnout," and you have no real symptom of what is constituted as actual burnout.
It's
It
really frustrating. It's so
it's frustrating
frustrating.
because it's like, great man, well, hope you help yourself, hope you find a way to help yourself or seek professional help. But you have to understand that there is kind of a line in which this becomes an actual issue in your life, right? And what sucks about everything, and again, we've talked about this before, and we have in a different episode, and I have as well in an episode with Raphael, who was the one that I think that mentioned pop psychology. Um, that it's it's more so than anything, it's not that one person's experience invalidates another, but that's kind of how psychology is even read to begin with. It's the comparison of one person's experience as an individual versus what is the norm across the board, because that's kind of how we can assess the brain and what is normal and what isn't, because all psychology is the brain understanding itself, isn't it? And so
Mhm.
that's why it's important to kind of like stick with it and stick with actual proper, like, peer reviewed research, because that's how you're going to identify something as an issue, because it can take years to figure out, oh, it wasn't depression and anxiety, it was burnout, right? Like if all of a sudden the clouds lift, it's like, well, hold on now, this wasn't this was actually that. And it also takes a long time to kind of pinpoint how to best treat something like that, especially because it's ever evolving. And like we were talking at the beginning, like this was triggered in part just by the fact that your entire uh, adult life was online and suddenly very in person. You had 3 years, I think, of normal. What your normal was isolation, and then you were suddenly faced with everything and a half. And so of course new stuff is going to come out, like the rates that come out of like people either suffering from mental illness or people on medication to deal with symptoms of mental illness, not even diagnosed mental illness, uh change so vastly, just because the world that we live in is changing so ridiculously fast, and it always has been. And I know that that sounds like a buzzword type phrase, but like the pandemic did kind of throw everyone into this like weird bubble of like, at the same time, isolation and constant connection, because everything went online and all of a sudden everything and everyone was entitled to your time all of the time.
Mhm. Yeah, and the pandemic was a nice break in the sense that there was a lack of a sense of responsibility because everyone did go on pause and you were allowed to stay home. And like, though my responsibility stopped with school, it got taken up when I was taking care of my dad and stuff before I moved, and in anticipation that he was going to pass. There's lots of stuff that needs to get done when you're planning ahead for that kind of thing. And I was pretty much the only child of theirs that was helping. My sisters kind of help, but they're a lot older than me. I think it could have been more, but I was the one that lived at home. I was 18, so in theory I was old enough, so I had to take that over. So for like I also started school in 2020 cuz I was like, "Oh, we're moving. Nothing's going to be going on this summer of 2020. Like
Oh,
I'll have
well,
time to
little
do a
did you
little
know.
classes." Little did I know that that was not the case at all. So it was very overwhelming to go from there, but then I kept thinking that, and I was like, well, okay, well, now I know everything's online. I'm just going to keep doing summer classes, winter classes, whatever. So I was doing straight school from 2020 until 2023, which is why I graduated a year early, because I just kept filling my time with that, because I was like, there's literally nothing else for me to do at this point. Might as well just get ahead on this thing, because otherwise I think I'm going to be very behind. So when everything did come in person, I did feel behind. And I was like, I'm not going to get a job that pays me very well. and I just did all of this for nothing, so I need to do more. And that's why I did my internship. It's why I'm doing my certification. It was like, how much can I physically do at my age to get the best possible outcome of a thing and go for it? And when social media, especially with TikTok and stuff, started taking off during this time, a lot of people started depending on it because it was like, how am I supposed to feel? What do people suggest to make me feel better? What am I supposed to be doing with my time right now? And you have those people who are like, oh, yeah, self care, like depression, anxiety is going to be really bad. Like, take time for yourself, go for walks outside, talk to friends, like, do all that stuff. Then you had the other side of the internet that was like, you can be doing remote work, get 10,000 steps a day, start your own business from your house, build a house,
Yeah.
start an ant colony, like whatever you
Start
could do.
an
They
ant colony.
they were like throwing anything out there, dude. They
Uh,
wanted you to be an ant during this time. And I was like, this is so wild. And no one knew what to do. So now that everyone's graduated and we're on our own spots and stuff, Carly and I were talking the other day, like what essentially led to this. Was there is so much going on and you are not given a direct path and you get pulled in so many different ways all of the time at our age that you get burnt out and you lose that sense of self-care because you don't know what you're supposed to be doing. And so you do what you think is best, but then you also hate yourself because it's like, oh, was that really the best thing for me? Could this have been done differently? Should I have listened to this other person? Was this a mistake? And it is constant. You are never, at least I'm never really secure in the decisions I'm making when it comes to like adult things. It's always a sense, yeah, 75% I'm sure I can do this, but there's always a little bit where I'm like, but am I okay with this though?
yeah.
Can't tell.
And what you're saying kind of mirrors what Lucian said in chat earlier about how self-love and self-care is overlooked right now in a world of hustle, and a lot of people put it last. And I feel like similarly to what you were saying, it's kind of what spurred this podcast was a conversation that we were all having kind of as a group about how we're reaching a point in which we're catching up to the world, or the world is catching up on the time that was lost during the pandemic. In which the only real silver lining that came out of it was that everyone had to take a step back. Everyone had to accept the fact that there was just going to be more time for yourself. If you lost your job or lost your schooling through it, what did that open up a door for? Time. And the only thing people, really could have potentially possibly gained from the pandemic, I think, is that. I feel like everyone kind of picked up new hobbies. Everyone kind of remembered what it was like to be as a human. A reference to an old podcast episode is that we were put on this world to take naps and eat berries, and that's exactly what we did.
Gosh, I miss that era. I quote that to my dad every day. I'm like, remember, like, I wish I could just sunbathe and eat a little berry and have none of this other stuff going on.
Start an ant colony.
Start an ant colony and eat berry.
Right. But like, similarly, the double-edged sword of that is that because everything went online, since everyone had to stop doing the things that they were doing, is that you were kind of faced with this concept of everything that you do must be productive. Like, I remember in all of the internships and jobs and classes that I was in at the time, like, it started off like, oh, we'll have work happy hour. Like, we'll just have it on Zoom. It'll be great. And sure, it was at first. And then it kind of became a thing where, like, everyone expected your time to be dedicated to their cause. And, I feel like we all at some point became guilty of this. Even in friend groups, right? Like, you have your computer, you have your phone. Why aren't you here? Why aren't you doing something? And I think that definitely is something that contributed to the, I guess, widespread rise in rates of burnout, is just that, like, when you don't have anything to do or you can't do anything, you're going to start to feel restless, and you have everyone telling you should be doing something. You should be picking up a second job. You should be picking up a virtual assistant gig. You should be investing in stocks. You should be researching NFTs. Like, there's so much that you could be doing, sure. But is that the way to live? Is that what it means to be a person? Is that the human condition? And I think that we are, like I said, catching up to a point where we're finding that balance again in the world of, this is the things that you have to get done, and this is the time that you have now to do things that you want to be doing. Although, since we're all kind of recovering from a time of just like, in general, academic, professional, and financial
Mhm.
slowdown, social slowdown, even, um, there's kind of like that, like, at the very least, in our case, Mac, myself, and whoever was in this conversation of our friends, there's like a nagging sense of you could be doing something else in the back of your mind. And I feel like, you mentioned you started streaming. That also followed me at some point because the podcast was originally just for fun and then kind of kicked off into what it is. I mean, we're sitting here talking and people are sitting here watching right now. Like, that's cool. That's great. But
Hey, chat.
every moment that I'm doing something that could be streamed, if I'm playing a video game, if I'm having a conversation, if I'm working on digital art, I'm like, I could be streaming this. This could be a dual source of income. I could be
Mhm.
promoting my business. I could be doing this. I could be doing that. And it's like, whoa, whoa, stop that. Take a nap and
Whoa,
eat a
whoa.
berry.
Nap and eat a bit. Sorry, I have an eyelash in my eye.
You're
I
fine.
don't know what disaster struck me. Um, but I finding that balance of like personal space has been really hard, and it's something I've worked on mostly for the last 6 months. Like since I got my diagnosed burnout stuff, I was like, okay, I need to make a conscious effort to have me time. Otherwise, it's just gonna like the cycle's gonna continue. And I'm the person who thinks me time is stupid, all right? I'm like, this is pointless. I could be getting ahead so I can relax later in life. Like, if I just do this, I can do all this other stuff later. And that's straight up just not how it works.
No, not at
um,
all.
you will never feel caught up on things. And what partially sparked this conversation is I was shopping with a couple friends the other day in this mall, and I was having a conversation with the cashier, and the cashier was like, "Oh, you're graduating, like you're doing all this stuff, like you're everything I aspire to be. Like I don't even know what I'm doing." And I was like, "I don't even know what I'm doing. Like, yeah, I graduated, but I don't know what to do after this. Like, there's no rule book." And there was a woman behind me who was probably in her 40s. She is who I would consider to be an adult at my age, and she was like, that feeling never goes away. And hearing that from someone who I consider an adult and being at the age that I thought was an adult when I was like 8, I'm like, oh my god, this really is never ending. Like I'm never gonna feel caught up on things. And so now it's like, okay, I have to be content and I have to make time for self care. So part
Yes,
of that was
that is
spending less
so
time on the
huge.
internet. So huge. You have to make time for it.
And I'm not
Because
even
Carly,
yeah.
oh, I was just gonna say, Carly and I literally like kind of made a pact together, spending less time online, even though that meant less time with our friends for our like mental health.
If you've listened to the show before, you'll remember one of our guests, Dylan, mentioned that Sundays he takes off for himself, which I thought was one of the coolest things ever because I accidentally started doing that when I started the podcast because Sundays became my homework and podcast day. And then after school, it just kind of became the day that I did what I wanted to do. Because during the week I was working, even Saturdays, I'd be like, oh, I didn't finish this on Friday, or I focused all my time on my contracts and I didn't do anything for my personal commissions. And so Sundays became like Sundays, I will play video games and I will podcast, and I will watch movies, or I'll go out with my family. Sundays are my I do what I want days. And so in telling this to Mac, because Mac was doing everything online, Mac also kind of embodied that. And for Mac, in this time, it meant taking a step back. And I was like, see, this is kind of the way to live life. You take one day to do what you want, do things in the real world if you're online all day or vice versa. Because I go through phases as well. Like right now I'm at my computer all day because I'm working from home, or I'm working on my stuff. And so my break from here is I'll go outside for an hour a day with my turtle at sunset. And it's great. I love that. I have my phone on me in case anything happens, but like I'm chilling, man. I'm chilling. I'm not doing anything. I'm sitting outside and I'm watching a turtle walk around.
And it looks different for everyone. And part of my struggle was I don't know what I genuinely like. And I did a lot of things that I was told to do, or as people, we compartmentalize people that we meet. It's how we function. Um, and it's because we try to assume what people are going to be like based off of what we already know and that kind of stuff. And so when you're put in this box by a bunch of different people and you're told this is how you're supposed to be, you kind of start falling in line with that stereotype. Even if you don't necessarily feel that way, it's like, oh, well, this is how I have to portray myself since this is how people already view me. And so part of that was like when I did start streaming, I got this whole like e-girl persona, right? Clearly I look like it because my hair is black, I have tattoos, I wear black clothing, like I got the gamer setup, whatever, right? So I really, really fell into that persona because I was like, this is how I'm viewed through like Twitch and stuff and my online friend group and like whatever. This is how I'm gonna be. But then when I decided to take the step back with Carly and everything and just like exist in the real world for a hot sec, I was like, I love reading. I love plants. I love collecting antiques and doing that kind of stuff. I love going to the park and going for walks and going to the farmer's market. And all of this stuff that necessarily didn't fit in with that stereotype, but it is who I am as a person. And reading poetry and stuff. I love reading poetry. Carly and I just had a whole conversation on that as well. And so I think that's part of the reason that I was a little bit burnt out is I was doing all this stuff, but I didn't know what for, and I didn't know if it was something I genuinely wanted to do or I was told to do and was told to be this way and do this thing. Lucky I'm happy with all my decisions. So it worked out in the end, but like you kind of do have to take a step back, and self-care is a form of figuring out who you are and
Yeah.
being with yourself. Um and I have a little compass on this necklace that I got as a graduation present. But essentially, like at the end of the day, logic is not going to be the only thing behind the decisions that you make in life. Sometimes your heart is involved.
It's gonna sound
And
cheesy, but follow
it's
your
going to
heart.
sound cheesy, but follow your heart. Like, it's not going to fail you. And if something doesn't go the way you thought it did, you're not going to know until you do it. You can't physically plan for the future because you only know what you know. You don't know what knowledge you're going to learn eventually.
You don't even
So
know
if
what you
you want
don't
to
know.
exactly. So like you might as well try the thing, figure out if you like it or not, and if you don't like it, then your heart's going to find a different path that it loves or likes better or whatever, instead of just constantly being told what you need to do all the time. Like
Yeah.
you got to listen to your heart. Your heart's not going to fail you. It has your best interest. Your brain has your best interest in you. It wants to see you keep going and it wants to be happy. Like sometimes you just got to sit down and read a book or go outside with the turtle at sunset. Like life doesn't have to be all luxurious and Great Gatsby. Like sometimes you can look at a cherry blossom tree and it'll bring you the same happiness as, I don't know, ant farms. Creating ant colonies.
You and those ant farms, man. Uh, Moses said earlier that we are in a position where we're addicted to productivity, and I wholeheartedly agree. And I think that ties in well to Lucian's point about how being an adult now is different than when our parents were, because of course all of our guidance comes from the previous generations or people who are ahead of us. Even this conversation kind of came from me telling Mac what I picked up in the, you know, several years of life experience that I have, because we have, like I said, there's a 5-year age gap, which isn't crazy, but at this age there's kind of like milestones that you've reached. However, we did have the shared life experience of having been in college around the same time. And so that's kind of how a lot of these conversations go in our round table discussion. We all get in our feelings. We'll just be like, well, because we're pretty much all in the same age range. Like we're, you know, between 20 and 30. And so we'll kind of just explain. Some of us are ahead, feel like we're ahead. Some of us feel like we're behind. Turns out all of us feel like we're behind because we're all just kind of comparing ourselves to each other. Like Mac's over here in a law office and she's talking about feeling behind. I'm over here feeling like I'm behind because I'm a freelancer, and other people are telling me, yo, it's so great that you control your own hustle. And I'm like, is it? So it's interesting because everyone's milestones are different. Your life is going to look different. Your goals are going to look different. And it's so much easier said than done. And I'm telling you this as something that I'm having to learn how to do. And apparently everyone up until the point that they die is learning to do, which is you can't compare yourself or your path or your journey to others. All you can really do is do what you're doing. And if that's keeping you alive, that's enough.
Yeah, you have to base it on yourself at the end of the day, which is a really hard thing to do. And it's something I still practice, and it's something you have to be practiced. But um, yeah, no one ever feels on par with one another. And at the same time, life also feels kind of overwhelming at points. And I told Carly about this, but I saw a quote the other day where privilege is not, oh, I chose the right decisions. It is the right decisions were given to me to choose from. Um, so even though financially I was okay in 2020, that was not always the case. And I did not know that I was going to be okay like that until 2020.
Yeah.
But at the same
Success
time,
is
I
your
was
own
also
metric.
Yeah, but at the same time, like, I was losing my dad and stuff. Like, it was very give and take, and I would have rather, like, had my father not go through that and taken out student loans than everything else that was going on at that time.
Right.
And going through all of that, it sometimes I'm 21, I've done all this shit, right? I have come to the conclusion that it is okay to be behind
Mhm.
and just live sometimes. I don't need to go. Life is so long. There will be plenty of time to do all the things I could ever want. So even though I think self-care is a little silly sometimes, or that I'm too mature, or I've been through too much stuff to like enjoy the things that other people my age enjoy, or whatever it is, sometimes I'm like, no, it is okay to be a little silly goofy, and it is okay to be a little irresponsible because that's fun. And doing things that you're not supposed to do makes the world turn. Laws do not get changed if people follow the rules. You have to be a rule breaker every once in a while, otherwise, nothing will change and your life will be the same as everyone else's. And that is not swag because we're here to be individuals.
What a phenomenal tangent. In tandem with this, we've had a hydration and a posture check in the chat. So drink your water, check your shrimp. In the meantime, let's take a quick little music and dance break. And when we return, we'll talk about, you know, self-care, what it means to us, self-worth, how to gauge that as our kind of closing convo to wrap everything up. But Mac, would you like to introduce the next song for us?
Oh, rats. I don't remember which one I
Cha
sent
cha
you.
cha.
Okay, so this is a song from Eurovision, and Leo showed it to us the other day, and it's kind of a banger, and I hope you enjoy.
All right, so without further ado, I wish I knew how to say this person's name. I think it's Kaarija from Finland. Here is Cha Cha Cha. We've talked some about how it's kind of hard to feel like you're doing enough or you're caught up with yourself in the world because your instinct is just going to be to compare yourself to others and kind of assess your own progress by the progress of those around you. You see someone living their dreams and you're like, well, what am I doing wrong? Right. Like, and so it's important to just kind of come to terms with the fact that you're living your life at your own pace. Build an ant farm if you want to take a nap and eat a berry. Um, but on the topic of self care, I want to hear more about what you, Mac, or anyone in the chat, or anyone in the world who happens to receive these brainwaves, does for self care. Lucian mentioned in the chat that something that she does for self care is doing a digital paint along on Mondays, which I think is really cool. I mentioned my turtle sunset hours.
Mm-hmm.
Mac, what do you do for self care?
I started investing a lot into like my little meat suit, aka my body. So like making sure that I keep my skincare up has been really
You're
important.
what?
My meat suit, it needs to be taken care of. So I have to give it vitamins. I have to put lotion on it. I have to make sure it smells good.
Oh my goodness. This is going to be
So
the
that's
clip that I used to promote your episode.
thank God. So that's been really important. I've also gotten really, really into reading the last couple months. I've actually finished a book, which I don't remember the last time I did that outside of school ever, like
Wow.
maybe middle school. I was very excited about that. Little walks. I love the outdoors sometimes. I don't go hiking. We've had this conversation. But
Mac
like
has
just
never been
little walks.
hiking, which I
I've
think
never
is
been hiking.
crazy.
But I love going on little walks or like little adventures for things. Sorry, my dogs are going feral. Makeup, so fun. I love trying new makeup and stuff. Obviously video games, like hanging out with you guys because we do have a really positive friend group, so that for self-image and everything and like knowing if I join I'm gonna get a giggle has been so fun. I'm like, wow, this is so exciting.
No, I wholeheartedly agree. Again, silver linings of the pandemic. Only silver lining was just there was more time to find to do something with yourself. And I also kind of refound my way into gaming. It's not like I was ever a gamer as a kid, but I did kind of, in retrospect, grow up around video games. Like my sister and I had these little like virtual pets that look like Tamagotchis, and you could hook it up to this console that connected to your TV, and then you could like go around and explore and complete the missions and give the items back and like blah 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 blah. I don't think I ever actually finished it. It was called Gigapets. I kind of really want to play Gigapets right now, but I don't think I can connect it to this TV. Toys of the past. But Pop Tropica, obviously, major. I was a YouTube kid more first and foremost. PUBG was huge. That's what got me into Twitch. It's got me into Discord. Now we're here, right? Now Valorant is my main. And any real any space exploration game I'm kind of into. And anything
I
you can
miss
play
the
with
Alien
friends.
game.
Oh my goodness.
Oh
I'll
my
play the
god, Red
Alien
Dead
game again some more.
Redemption.
Red
I
Dead is
love Red.
fun.
Oh my god, I've been playing the heck that. Okay, Sims is my comfort game. It's been my comfort game since I was like 9. I shared this really embarrassing fact before, but I've genuinely spent like 2 full years of my life playing Sims, just Sims 4. Like doesn't even include Sims 2 or Sims 3. Like genuinely because it is so like if my mental health is down, I'm just playing Sims constantly. And so that chef's kiss, but now I'm into Red Dead because I get to ride a cute little horse around, and that's been so fun. And that's not necessarily I play with like Karli and everyone, but it's really fun to be in a call with everyone and have us all do our own individual little things, whether that's playing games or like working, or sometimes people will have us on the phone as they're like packing or cleaning their house or whatever, and that's really
It's
fun
just
to
nice
have
to
like
have companionship.
community.
Yeah.
Yes.
Lucian says that she does 30 minutes of exercise a day, or tries to, does skincare, long Epsom salt soaks, because everything is sore afterwards, and sculpting with modeling clay. Moses says,
Ooh.
online friends for the win, horse riding, yay, and dancing around the house to music you love. Honestly, music
Yes.
is one of the major things that made me realize that I was not doing enough for myself at some point. Especially when I was working at the radio station, I oversaw the studios, and I had access to a keyboard, amps for guitars, and a drum set. And of course, my hobby has always been, I don't know if that's an of course statement. I actually don't know how many times I've mentioned it either on stream or on the podcast. I guess I've done music streams, not the point. Having access to everything that I loved, because I monetized art, so that kind of stopped being a hobby and started being a job. Having access to everything I loved, there would be like months that would go past, and I'd realize like I haven't even looked at sheet music in God knows how long. And so that kind of became like a big red flag to me. Like if there, because I usually listen to music, but if ever there came a time when I realized I haven't sat down and learned a new song in a month, I would force myself to like commit, learn a new song, and like I would put in like an hour every day, because when I was a kid I did piano lessons every week for an hour on Thursdays at 6:00. And so like it was always like a part of my routine. And so without having that sort of creative expression, and not something that was going to be monetized, because like I said, once I started painting as a job, like if I paint, it's like, oh, I could be working. I'm not monetizing music yet. So like as of now, it's still just a fleeting hobby. And it's fun. Like you can't see it, but guitars over here, guitars over there, pianos over there. Like I have instruments, and if I don't play them, it becomes a thing. And I remember they would make fun of me on online, because I would usually have drumsticks near me, and I'd be playing with them, and people would be like, "Do you even play the drums?" And I'd be like, "Yeah, of course I do. What's the last thing you played?" And I'd be like, ask me in a week once I've gone back to the studio. It's like, I promise I'm not a poser.
Yeah, Karli, I have promised I was playing the drums. I've seen videos of it.
Yeah, there's at least 2 videos online of me playing the drums.
Yes. I don't do the instrument thing. I'm really bad at playing instruments. I tried the viola in 4th grade, and it was my downfall, and I never picked up another one since then.
Oh no.
But where Moses was saying like listening to music around your house, I love listening to music and cleaning my house, and it is kind of my me time. But I think there's so much comfort in music because, yeah, you can get hyped up, you can listen to club music, whatever, but you also find songs that you relate to on a really personal level, and it's really comforting to know, like, hey, this super famous person's going through the same thing that I'm doing, or someone feels the same way and was able to put it in these words, and like it hits personally. Um, and on the topic of this, when we were talking about it, I brought up Stoned at the Nail Salon by Lorde, because that entire song is about how she loves where she lives and she loves the life that she has, but she always wonders, like, what if she had that different lifestyle? Like, what if she could, live the lifestyle of the girl who is barely at her apartment and can go clubbing all the time and goes on all these cool adventures, meeting all these cool people, while that girl is probably wishing, like, oh, I wish I had a consistent job and a consistent friend group and like a place I can call home. Like, everyone's always going to want something they don't have. That's a part of human nature. And we're always going to have that sense of FOMO, for lack of a better term.
Yeah.
But I am a firm believer that you can kind of experience all parts of life. It might not be in the exact way you think it's gonna happen, but I think you can get that feeling. Because at the end of the day, I think it's a feeling that we are yearning for more so than the thing itself.
Yeah.
Um, and how Carly said, like, hanging out with, the rest of our friend group and stuff this last week and, like, living that lifestyle, which looked so cool, and I was so happy to see all my friends and stuff together, like, that lifestyle made her sad after the fact because it's like, "Oh, that's temporary," but that doesn't mean it's temporary forever, just
Yeah.
means it was temporary at that moment, and I feel the same way, like, I wish I
It's
could go
peaks
out
and
and do all
valleys,
this.
dude.
And it's wild because you
Yeah.
think life is so short because we are so rushed. We need to get so much done. If we're not doing enough, it's never going to get done. We're going to miss out. But at the end of the day, we're only in our 20s. Like, it's going to happen eventually. And I think slowing down and noticing the little bits and bobs along the
Yeah.
way is gonna go a lot farther, and finding the music that you relate to and that makes you feel joy, even if it's to romanticize your life, romanticize the
Yeah.
car drives that you go on, or reminds you of a person that you miss. Like, whatever it is, I
Just
think
finding
music is a
ways
really
to
good way.
yeah.
Yeah, to, like, connect all of that together and
Uh-huh.
obviously connect people because you and I met through music.
Yeah.
Um,
It's
and
cool to see not even just specifically music, just how the arts in general, or I guess any interest in general, can connect somebody. Because I was going to say the arts, like movies and music and painting and stuff, but like, you can bond over knowing what is it that Lucian said earlier. You can bond over knowing what non-Newtonian fluid is. I don't know what that is, but like now I'm intrigued. So if somebody out there knows about it, you can teach me, and now we've formed a connection.
yeah, you can find random middle grounds with people, and that's what's been so fun. And stepping back from the online space, I started talking to a lot more people in real life, even if it's little chat chats with bartenders or people at cash registers or wherever. Like anywhere, I'm just a little chit chatter. I will just bring up a little combo, or they'll bring up a little combo and go from there. And it's really cool to see that probably with 99.9% of people, you're going to find some kind of thing in common, even if it's super like detailed and particular. Like there's always going to be that connection between humans, and I think humans are really cute. I think it's cute that we have created this little society and we struggle with these little things, but at the same time, we're gonna get really happy if we see a dog or when our favorite song comes
Yeah.
on, or that we dance in our little houses when we're feeling a little down. Like, that's so cute!
It's adorable. And I think you made a good point earlier about how like I came back from like the high of like getting to, I took my first vacation since I was 10, and when I was 10 it was a family vacation. This is like the first time that I personally have ever been like I'm taking time off for me, and like I went out and I went to concerts, I met up with friends, I got to do such cool things. And now that I'm home I'm like, man, that was the life, dude. And so, it's so stupid. As I'm saying it, I feel like I sound like one of those like live, laugh, love signs that say, don't cry because it's over, smile because it happened. But like, it's true. It's kind of like rather than treating your milestones as a way to compare your success or lack thereof to that of others, it's more so about finding the things that make life worth living in the first place. I'm not saying I agree with Mac that, do crimes make life exciting, but I do feel like I'm the type of person that like and granted, I did tell you my story about what I was up to in 2017, or I was just going to move to another country because why not? Like, I am the type of person, I recognize that I'm the type of person that when I feel restless, I will upend everything just to have something to fix, which isn't healthy. I've learned how to deal with that now as an adult. I feel like, oh, I'm restless. Okay, maybe don't do that. Just pick up a new hobby. Do some self-care. It's fine. You're okay. um,
Chill out a little.
chill out a little. But like you said, humans are cute. It's about finding things that make the day to day worth it. It's about ways to make the mundane more exciting. And that's kind of it. Like for me, I look forward to sunset so I can go hang out with my turtle. And that's fun and that's fine. And that's my highlight. For you, it's cleaning your house to music, for whoever it is, it's doing whatever it is, right? Like there's just it's important, I guess, to take time and do like one good thing for yourself. If that's whatever it is, if that's eating a cheesecake, like whatever it is that happiness means to you, take that time and like even if it's not what you feel like you're supposed to be doing, five
Do it
minutes is not,
anyways.
yeah, do it anyway. 5 minutes is not the end of the world. Delaying
And
whatever task or whatever engagement or whatever, like activity is that you were supposed to be doing, it'll be there. It'll be there. And if it's not, try again next time. It's fine.
Yeah, it wasn't meant to happen. And I'll say this as someone who is like probably going to have to move, does really bad with change and stuff. I am grateful for all of the people I've met in my life. I am no longer friends with most of them, but I still have very happy memories with them, and they helped create that sense of love and something to look forward to in that like movie moment. Um, but at the same time, a lot of that wouldn't have happened if I didn't get out of my comfort zone. So if you're scared to do a thing, but you think you'll like it, don't overthink it. You sometimes just have to take the jump. And life figures itself out one way or another. And I think it's almost worth it in the end to know that you were brave enough to do that thing and possibly get that movie moment or whatever it is that you're seeking. Instead of always wondering if that's what it holds on the other side.
You're so right. Well, you know, that's exactly what it is. Just see what's next. Mack, thank you so much for being here. As our time draws to a close, do you have any final closing remarks or statements or shout outs that you would like to give right now?
I will say to follow your heart. It's going to know what's best for you, and no one else is going to know that. Take chances, genuinely. Like, even if it's never going to a park alone or something before, it doesn't have to be big. Do something you haven't done before. Get out of your comfort zone a little bit. You don't always need to be building an ant farm. You can if you want, but make sure you do a little face mask in between. And that's my final comment of the night.
Well, on that note, thank you so much. You're listening to Podcast with a K, and I'm your host, Karla with a K, signing off. Thank you for being here. We'll have new nonsense and new guests for you next week. And, you know, from here on out, the world is your oyster and the future is what you make of it. Mack, would you like to give us our final song for the night, considering we've talked about
Absolutely.
dancing around to music?
Absolutely. So I need everyone to know I got into country music ironically because I think it's funny, which in theory means I now like it because I think it's funny, so I like country music. So the song of choice is Country Girl, and I hope you enjoy.
Well, without further ado, chat listeners, thank you so much for being here. This is Luke Bryan's Country Girl. Now, don't shake it for me, but shake it for somebody. And if it's somebody, it's yourself. Have a good night.